In the dimming light of late afternoon, a small wooden sign swung from a black metal bracket, squeaking softly whenever the wind brushed by. The sign bore the dainty outline of a ladle and spoon, though the paint had long faded. The place was called Maison de Ninon, a quaint French-inspired restaurant nestled in a historic district known more for antiquarian bookshops than fine dining. Despite its unassuming exterior, Maison de Ninon was said to offer an unforgettable culinary experience, one that people from all over the region whispered about. It wasn't on any tourist map, and even the locals rarely mentioned it out loud, except in murmured tones. That evening, Adam Harrington stood at the threshold of this establishment, gripping the door handle. He had heard the rumors. This restaurant served a dish so evocative that it could conjure up memories you never knew you had, memories that lurked in the shadows of your mind, waiting for the right moment to surface. Adam had come both out of curiosity and necessity. Recently, he'd been plagued by recurring nightmares, dreamscapes filled with half-remembered faces and sharp pangs of regret. He didn't know how Maison de Ninon could help, but rumors had a way of stoking hope in the desperate. Shaking off a chill, he pushed the door open and stepped inside. The interior was reminiscent of an old European bistro. Stone walls, flickering sconces, and rich mahogany tables cast an intimate warmth. The place smelled faintly of rosemary, thyme, and something mysteriously sweet that defied easy identification. Candles flickered on each table, their reflections dancing on porcelain plates. At first glance, the restaurant seemed nearly empty. Only one other couple sat by the bay window, whispering in hushed voices. Adam's gaze fell upon an unoccupied table near the back, half hidden behind a low partition covered with vines. As he ambled toward that secluded spot, a woman with a soft French accent gently called to him. She introduced herself as Elodie, the maître d'. She was slender, with dark wavy hair pinned gracefully at the nape of her neck. Her eyes held a patient kindness that put Adam at ease, until he noticed the slightest tension in her smile, as though she knew something she couldn't share. Without asking, she led him to the quiet table near the partition and placed a single menu in front of him. "Take your time, monsieur," she said softly. "We have some specials I think you will find most intriguing." Adam looked down at the menu, cream-colored cardstock with swirling gold script. The offerings were in French, which he could read only in fragments. Steak frites, bouillabaisse, coq au vin. Each item described with poetic flourishes. But then he noticed a line at the bottom of the menu, separate from the other entries. La mémoire cachée. No description followed, just a small asterisk. He looked up and caught Elodie's eye across the room. She nodded once, confirming that this was likely the dish he'd heard rumors about. Summoning courage, Adam waved her over. "I'd like the special dish," he said. Elodie's expression flickered with what could have been sympathy, or perhaps apprehension. "Very well, one serving of La Mémoire cachée." He watched as she made her way into the back kitchen, the tapping of her heels echoing on the polished wood floor. Outside, night had begun in earnest, the windows reflecting only the warm lights within. The other couple had finished their meal, slipping out the door without so much as a glance back. For a moment, Adam found himself entirely alone in the dining room, accompanied only by the faint hum of the overhead lights and the subtle orchestra of kitchen activity behind closed doors. Roughly 10 minutes later, Elodie returned with a covered silver platter. She set it down before Adam, lifting the lid gently. Steam rose, a sweet, spicy, and faintly herbal aroma permeated the air. Beneath the silver dome lay a small porcelain bowl filled with velvety purja, garnished with fresh herbs and a drizzle of red gold oil. Adam's heart quickened. Without delay, he dipped the polished spoon into the mixture and brought it to his lips. The taste was at once familiar and completely alien. It hinted at childhood comfort foods, caramelized onions, roasted almonds, perhaps a trace of cinnamon, but beneath those flavors lurked something indefinable. With each bite, Adam felt an odd prickle along the back of his neck. By the time he finished half the bowl, his hands were trembling on the table. He felt disoriented, as if he were no longer fully in that cozy dining room, but somewhere else, somewhere in his past. A rush of images flooded his mind. A crowded birthday party, a woman singing a lullaby, a sense of heartbreak he couldn't attribute to any single memory. Voices echoed, faces blurred into one another, and Adam gripped the edge of the table, trying to steady himself. He almost knocked over his water glass, and Elodie rushed to his side. I'm okay, Adam stammered, though his voice shook. I just need a moment. She nodded, then retreated to give him space, a look of genuine concern in her eyes. The cacophony inside his head gradually subsided, but faint impressions lingered. Unresolved conversations, old arguments, a child's laughter. He stared at the spoon, then at the remnants of the purge. He had come seeking answers, but he hadn't anticipated such a surge of sensations. In the hush that followed, he realized he needed to delve deeper, to find out what these memories meant. After a few moments, he put the spoon down, eyes fixed on a swirl of the purge that shimmered under the candlelight, like a secret waiting to be told. Amen. He awoke the next morning with a dull ache behind his eyes, unsure if the storm of recollections from the previous night had been real or just a lingering dream. Over a cup of black coffee, he tried to piece together the images. He could place some of them, scenes from his formative years, arguments with former friends, a heartbreak from his teenage days. Yet one face haunted him, a little girl with pigtails who seemed to appear in every flash of memory, sometimes crying, sometimes laughing, but always there. Adam couldn't recall ever having a sister or any close relative her age back then. Who was she? Haunted by questions, he found himself drawn back to Maison de Ninon that evening. Instead of dining, he decided to simply talk to someone who might know more. Distracted by urgent curiosity, Adam missed that the street seemed darker, the wind sharper. He slipped inside the restaurant and noticed a different atmosphere. Vacant tables, no other patrons, but soft music drifting from an unseen speaker. Elodie emerged, holding a small notepad. She gave him the same gentle smile, but a worried crease lined her brow. "Back so soon, monsieur?" she asked. La mémoire cachée has a way of bringing people back, with question. Eddie's voice trembled slightly. "I need to understand what I saw. There was a little girl in my memories. I don't recognize her from my real past. Could the dish have triggered something else? Something not mine?" Elodie studied him, as though gauging how much to reveal. Then she motioned for him to follow her beyond the main dining room to a small alcove. It looked like a converted pantry, with shelves of spices, jars of sauces, and dusty wine bottles. She gestured for him to sit on a stool, then she locked the door behind them. "What I'm about to tell you does not leave this room," she began softly. La mémoire cachée is made from a family recipe that was passed down for generations. But the key ingredient is not merely a spice. It's something we call le don du passé, a gift from the past. It touches places in the heart and the mind that are usually locked away. Adam felt a tightness in his throat. But how can it make me remember people I've never met, or cause me to see things that don't belong to my own experiences? She ran her fingers over a row of labeled glass jars, pausing at one with the label rubbed off by time. Sometimes the dish reveals more than your memories. It unearths your ancestors, or those connected to you through thin threads of fate. In some cases, it even dredges up shared histories. The room felt colder than it should have. A chill clung to Adam's skin, and he had the distinct feeling that reality itself wavered like unbalanced lighting. The notion of inherited memories, or memories that transcended an individual's life, left him dizzy. Yet as unbelievable as it sounded, the strange glimpses he'd experienced suggested that maybe, just maybe, Elodie was telling the truth. "I need to try it again," Adam said abruptly. Elodie placed a hand on his shoulder. "This dish is not a toy. It can help you find answers, but it can also lead you places you might not want to go. The rest of your mind, the reason these memories were repressed or kept hidden, will fight back. Some people lose themselves." For a moment, Adam thought about turning away. But the unidentified child had stirred something deep in him, a longing he couldn't quite name. He thanked Elodie and left, deciding he would return the next night. He spent the interim hours lost in old photo albums, half-forgotten diaries, and rummaging through the attic of the home he'd inherited from his late parents. Yet none of it provided a clue about a missing child or any girls that matched her description. The following evening, Adam entered Maison de Ninon once more, but this time the place felt more alive. A handful of tables were occupied, and hushed conversation hummed through the air. Candlelight flickered across half-drawn curtains and smoky mirrors, creating an atmosphere both alluring and unnerving. Adam spotted Elodie at the far end of the dining room, her posture stiff, face drawn with tension. She offered him a polite nod as he slid into his previous seat at the back. He waved her over and ordered la mémoire cachée again, this time with a glass of red wine to steady his nerves. She nodded, gave him a measured, look-some blend of caution and resignation, and retreated to the kitchen. The moment she disappeared behind the swinging door, Adam's heart began drumming. He was about to dive into the unknown once again, fishing for secrets that might unravel him. Still, he couldn't resist the pull. When Elodie returned, she quietly placed the silver platter before him. Adam inhaled deeply, letting the aroma wash over him. This time he found the dish more potent, or perhaps his senses were primed by familiarity. Each spoonful soaked into his consciousness like an ink stain spreading on paper, a wave of memories, both distinctly his own and others that felt foreign, crashed into him. He found himself recalling a summer night in an old backyard. A little girl held his hand, calling him Adam in a voice brimming with trust and love. He saw the moonlit silhouettes of adults inside the house, a man and a woman, likely his parents. The girl's ponytails bounced as she skipped in circles, giggling. Suddenly the scene changed. A shrill cry pierced the air, followed by the grinding squeal of car tires. An ambulance siren wailed in the distance. Then, darkness. A moment later, another vision. Adam standing at the edge of a hospital bed, the girl's small hand dwarfed in his own. Machines beeped, nurses whispered, and there was a dreadful sense of finality. Her eyes fluttered open, and she gasped through tears. "Adam, don't leave me." He nearly dropped his spoon in horror. Sweat beaded on his forehead. Indeed, he had known that girl. She had been an integral part of his life, but for reasons unknown, he had blocked her out entirely. Through the swirling haze of these revelations, Adam felt a looming question. Had she died that night, or had something else driven him to abandon her? The chaotic storm in his mind lessened enough for him to notice his surroundings. Other customers were staring. One woman whispered to her companion, and Adam sensed pity in their eyes. Struggling to catch his breath, he realized he had to leave. He paid hastily and stumbled out. Elodie followed him to the doorway. "It's coming back to you, isn't it?" she murmured. He nodded, unable to form words. That night, Adam tossed in a fevered sleep. He dreamed of the little girl. Her name was Ingrid. He recognized it now from the echoes in his mind. She and Adam had spent countless summers during childhood together, building blanket forts, naming stars, telling secrets. She was his half-sister, a piece of his life he had entirely forgotten. Their father had chosen a separate family at some point, or so the story went, leaving Ingrid's mother to raise her alone. But in a twist of fate, Ingrid's mother had passed away, and Ingrid had come to live with Adam's family for a brief period. At least, that's what the dream fragments suggested. In one particularly vivid dream, Adam saw the night of the accident. Ingrid had run out onto the road chasing a stray kitten in the glow of the street lamp. The car that hit her had disappeared into the darkness, leaving her broken and bleeding on the pavement. Adam, who was only 14 at the time, was paralyzed with fear. Paramedics arrived, but Ingrid's injuries were too severe. When he woke up the next morning, Adam was shaking and bathed in sweat. The dream felt treacherously real, yet if he truly had experienced such trauma, why had his memories of Ingrid vanished? Perhaps his mind had built a fortress around the heartbreak, sealing it away. He now understood the gist. Ingrid had died, and with her passing came a wave of guilt and grief so overwhelming that Adam's psyche blocked it out for decades. Now, though, the memories were re-emerging, jagged and painful. Adam realized he needed closure, but the question remained, why had Ingrid been so persistent in his recollections of the dish? He sensed she wanted him to uncover the truth about that night, perhaps to find justice, or at least acceptance. He decided to talk to Elodie again. She seemed to know more than she let on, as though she had not only the recipe but also the wisdom behind it. Later that same day, Adam walked to the restaurant just before dusk. Unlike previous visits, he found it shuttered. The wooden sign was still out front, but the lights inside were off and the tables were empty. The door, however, was unlocked. Tentatively, he pushed it open and let himself in. The only illumination came from a sliver of lingering sunlight through the drawn curtains. A hush lay over the room like a thick blanket, but Adam heard low voices from the kitchen. He edged toward the back, careful not to make a sound. Through the small window in the swinging door, he spotted Elodie talking to a younger man in a chef's uniform. Their expressions were grave. Adam couldn't catch every word, but he heard snippets. Too dangerous. Some don't survive. We must be careful. The memories can drive them mad. His heart pounded. Were they discussing him or others who had eaten the dish? He quietly pushed the door open. They froze, startled by his sudden appearance. "Elodie, I need to understand," Adam said, forcing calm into his voice despite the panic rising in his chest. "About Ingrid. About what happened to her." Her shoulders slumped. "Adam, you've remembered enough to trace the shape of your past, but if you want the final answers, you might need one last taste. Just be warned. The deeper you go, the more painful the truth." Before Adam could respond, the young chef intervened. "Elodie, you know what it can do to him. He's not the first to come searching for something lost. Some never return to themselves fully." "I have to do it," Adam insisted. Elodie contemplated him in silence, then turned to one of the worn spice cupboards, extracting the jar with the faded label. She prepared a smaller batch this time, carefully mixing ingredients in a pot. The chef lit the stove, and they worked in solemn hush. Within minutes, the aromatic scent drifted through the kitchen. Adam's pulse roared in his ears. When it was ready, Elodie ladled the piping hot pure into a small porcelain bowl. Adam lifted the spoon to his lips, aware that this might place him in mental freefall. He took a measured mouthful. The flavor was even more intense now, almost searing his tongue with bittersweet tang. Images came like lightning strikes. Ingrid's hand slipping from his grasp, his father's anguished face, the flashing lights of an ambulance painting the night in red washes. Guilt slammed into him. He saw himself standing in the middle of the street, tears streaming, feeling powerless. A tightness in his chest threatened to crush him. Another scene materialized. Heather Ingrid's passing. Adam's parents had arranged therapy sessions for him, but the therapy never took hold. The pain was too heavy. The teenage mind found refuge in forgetting. Suddenly, a stark recollection tore through the haze. Ingrid lying in a hospital bed, her frail body covered in bruises, hooking Adam's pinky with hers in a final vow. She whispered something that Adam believed at the time to be nonsense. But now he could hear her words clearly. "Promise me you will live enough for both of us." Her voice was trembling, tears streaming from half-closed eyes. A final exhale, and then she was gone. The swirl of images slowed like a record winding down. Adam found himself on the kitchen floor, doubled over, tears cascading. It felt as though Ingrid's spirit flowed through him in that moment, an overwhelming sense of loss, regret, and yet a glimmer of peace at having remembered. Elodie knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. He clutched at wrist, not caring about the tears, or the snot, or the unsteady rise and fall of his chest. Grief ricocheted inside him, but it was a cathartic, necessary wave, pulling away the last bits of the darkness in which he had hidden this tragedy. After Adam recovered some composure, Elodie helped him to his feet. The kitchen's overhead light buzzed gently, casting pale shadows. The young chef hovered by the stove, respectfully keeping his distance. For a while, no one spoke. When Adam finally steadied his breathing, he turned to Elodie. "I remember now. Ingrid was my sister," he said, voice hoarse. "She died, and I buried every memory of her. It hurt too much." Elodie's gaze was warm with understanding. The disc doesn't pretend to heal. It only reveals. Real healing has to come from you. Adam stared at the remnants of la mémoire cachée in the bowl. the once enticing aroma now heavy with sorrow and truth. "I understand," he whispered. "You and your family have a gift, but it's a dangerous one." She nodded, looking weary. "We offer people a chance to face what they cannot remember, or what they are too afraid to confront. Some find solace, others become unhinged. It's always a risk." A new calm settled over Adam. Though the pain was sharp, he felt more grounded than he had in years. The nightmares might linger for a while, perhaps a lifetime, yet knowing the source of his torment gave him a sense of purpose. Ingrid's final words reverberated in his mind. "Promise me you will live enough for both of us." Somewhere in that tender plea, Adam recognized a path forward. He would honor that promise, now that it was no longer hidden in his subconscious. In the days that followed, Adam felt the weight of Ingrid's memory with a mixture of sorrow and gratitude. He found her name in old family documents, discovered pictures he had never been able to look at before, and even visited her grave for the first time since the funeral he had completely forgotten. He stood by the small headstone, tears in his eyes, but a certain peace blossoming in his chest. He left a single white lily there, a promise fulfilled. He never spoke to anyone else about the dish, though. The memory of it was too raw, and part of him believed it was better kept secret. In a small leather-bound journal, he penned down everything he recalled about Ingrid. Her love of kittens, her goofy smile, the silly jokes only younger siblings could conjure. Each word was an exorcism of sorts, a release that let him breathe a little easier. Occasionally he'd pass by Maison de Ninon. He noticed new patrons going inside, lured by some ineffable curiosity. Once he even glimpsed a pale-faced woman stumbling out under the watchful gaze of Elodie, who supported her with a gentle arm around her shoulders. Adam simply watched from across the street, an ache in his chest. He wanted to approach. He wanted to tell that woman that whatever she discovered in her memories, there was a chance of coming out stronger on the other side. But he remained still, respecting the sanctity of the experience, knowing each soul had to undergo that journey alone. Some nights, storms of memory continued to rage in his dreams, but they no longer filled him with the same unnameable dread. Each recollection of Ingrid, both good and bad, was a lock that had finally been clicked open. There was a hidden recipe in his life that he now understood: vulnerability and courage, grief and love, pain and hope. The visions he had tasted in that strange purge were not a condemnation but a key to healing. It was nearly 3 weeks later when Adam found himself walking along the narrow historic street once more, passing antique shops, candlelit bistros, and carefully tended flower boxes. He stopped at Maison de Ninon's entrance. The sign still creaked overhead. Through the arched window he could see people dining, laughing softly, sipping wine. The hush of memory lay behind that door, and an ache of nostalgia tugged at him. He wondered if he might go in and just say hello to Elodie. In the end, he decided against it. He had already taken from that place what he needed. He walked away, heading home. Ingrid's face flashed in his mind, but this time he smiled. He had a sister to remember, to love, and to cherish in his thoughts. For the first time in years, his steps felt lighter. Perhaps within him was an ember of hope that through remembering the past, he could shape a healthier future. His lost memories were no longer hidden. They were part of him, and that made him whole in a way he had never felt before. Behind him, Maison de Ninon kept its secrets, waiting for the next curious soul, brave or desperate enough to taste the dish that reveals all. In the quiet evening air, as the final sliver of sunlight vanished, one could almost hear the gentle whispers of bygone stories carried on the wind. But Adam heard only Ingrid's faint laughter, a soft call from somewhere in his heart, guiding him onward to the life he had promised her he would live.